Hello and welcome. Come on in, join me, pull up a chair, grab a cup of tea, and let's have a little chat because this is Tea with a Therapist, number 17. Hi, I'm Phil Naylor, and this is my weekly little update, my weekly little broadcast into the world, just talking about things, all things psychological, mental health, mental wellness. I like to think of wellness instead of mental health. I like to spin on that a little bit better. And just all things personal development in this area. So I'm trying to provide perspectives and provide education to people about basically how they work, how our psychological makeup works, and the various things that we get challenged with along the way that may or may not bring us to therapy. But since I'm a therapist, I'm talking from that perspective. So this is just me talking. This is just my perspective. It's not therapy, and I don't represent all therapists' viewpoints, so I may get some disagreements. But anyway, enough about all this. And here is my tea. I hope you're joining me for some tea as well. And this weekend, rare, but I got to catch up a little bit on some reading. And I haven't been able to read a book for a while, and I like to do that. I actually read a physical book in my hand. I wasn't, scrolling through screens, reading texts and Facebook posts and bits of this and that or videos. Actually sitting down and reading some books, which was nice. So I was reading things psychological, and as I often do, and it's nice to do that because I tell my clients when they're going through change or they're trying to change is to feed your head. I say, feed your head, read information, take in new perspectives on ideas, because we get locked into our ideas and our perspectives, and we get lost in those, and we need some other perspectives to keep things fresh and to move us forward. And I'm no different. And as a psychotherapist, I think as all people, we get locked into our routines, our ways of looking at things and thinking about things, and we kind of get stuck in a bit of a thought pattern or style of doing things or whatever. And sometimes we need new ideas to feed us and give us new perspectives, or sometimes they're not even new ideas. They're things that we knew but had forgotten. They drifted. We let them drift by the wayside somehow. So I was connected to some Jung and some other kinds of kind of metaphysical stuff, and it kind of brought me around to some new and old ideas, and that is to do with how we make change, or techniques of making change. And I may have talked at an earlier session here that there's different types of things we do in psychotherapy. A lot of what we do, I would say, would kind of be tweaking, and there's nothing wrong with tweaking. Sometimes we just need little things, or we need some strategies. We kind of lose perspective on things. We need somebody else to give us some perspective and some strategies to kind of get back on track. And even though sometimes things look like big things, that we need to change big things, sometimes we just need to make small adjustments to make a big difference. I find that with couples counseling as well. Sometimes it looks like, oh, we got these big differences and irreconcilable ways of looking at things, and we're going to have to fundamentally change our relationship, when really it just comes down to making some small adjustments. Tweaking can make a big difference, because people are fundamentally happy with their lifestyle and the way things are going. They just need a couple of things fixed, and it doesn't take that much to fix them. So a lot of when we need change, we need tweaking, and small changes can make big differences in our lives and our perspectives. So a lot of what we do is that stuff, I think, anyway. But sometimes we need more than tweaking. We're stuck in a deep pattern. Our lives are not going well for a number of different reasons, and we've been doing all the tweaking we can, trying this technique, that strategy, trying to shift our thinking and things. Sometimes what we need is just to fundamentally shift out of where we are into something new, and that's transformational psychotherapy, which is can be very powerful when it's done, but there's not as many techniques per se for that to happen. It's a lot to do with helping people kind of draw on their own resources, and the fruit has to be ripe, so to speak. When we're really ready for change, uh, it's it's easy to facilitate because people are actually ready. They're ready to drop all of those old patterns that they had and move into something entirely new. So you have to be really ready for that. And when you facilitate that, it can be very powerful, and it's kind of spectacular to see some people make these huge changes, having huge insights and really taking a quantum leap out of their old life into kind of a new life. So speaking of quantum stuff, some of the stuff I was reading about had to do with the idea that of us creating our own reality, and in some ways obviously, we know we do because, sorry, making some adjustments there, because just general psychology, we know that our beliefs and the way we view the world, we perceive the world in a certain way, and it's driven by our beliefs, and our beliefs create thoughts, and our thoughts create us to act in certain ways, and it has a cascading effect, and how we act in the world also affects kind of what we get back. So there's a lot of this idea that we are acting in accordance with beliefs, and sometimes these are misguided beliefs, or you may say limiting beliefs that when they're not working for us, beliefs that don't work for us very well. And a lot of CBT, well, sometimes CBT is more changing the thought patterns, but I'm more of addressing the actual beliefs that underlie things. So, which is a bigger task, because when you believe something, the thing about beliefs is you believe them. So it's hard to let go of things you believe unless you're really ready to let go of those things. But I'd forgotten about kind of a way to look at things, which is actually an old way, and that is that we create stories about the world. And when you think about it, a lot of the way we communicate information, and it's communicated to us, is through stories. When you watch a movie, it's a story. The narratives, they always talk on TV that they're struggling to get the narrative. Who gets control of the narrative, in this political talk? That means who's getting control of the story? Whose story is being listened to more? When you're around with friends, what do? You're telling stories about what happened. Or your spouse comes home, you tell stories about what you did and during the day. And if you look at cultures, how has culture transmitted is often through the stories that are told. And if you look at Native American culture, there's a lot of big tradition of storytelling, and in Western cultures there's myths and stories and all that kind of interweave our culture. And that's a fundamental way with hypnosis. When I'm working with the unconscious communicates in the form of stories and metaphors. Metaphors meaning analogies of, this thing is like that thing. I often give the analogy or metaphor of understanding our conscious and unconscious mind as looking at a computer and comparing that to a computer, that the screen of a computer is like our conscious mind and the hard drive is like our unconscious mind. The screen just displaying limited information that we need to pay attention to now, but all of the vast reservoir of information to draw on is stored on the hard drive. So that's a metaphor that is easy to understand. So we understand what a computer is and how that works, and it's easy then to apply that concept into something else and helps us to understand it. This thing is like that other thing. And that's how dreams are full of metaphors in our stories. And so our minds are set up to have a proclivity for metaphors and stories. And we like stories. We listen when people that present and they're telling little stories along the way, that kind of engages us and makes us interested and all that. So we're geared for stories. And so there's reading one book that we're talking about, and this is a good idea that I think that I'd like to communicate to people as a way to really start to change, especially to start to make new changes, is to, one, understand your own story. Because we all kind of have a story. We have a way of seeing our life and the way it has been and the way it is. And it's just a story, because we put together information in a certain way so that we understand it. And it has a kind of continuum, you know. But going back to some of the metaphysical stuff is that events are neutral. And the meaning we put on them is what we bring to it. We fill out the details of what events mean, by our own, we impose our beliefs and ideas about what all that meant, and where was I in relation to that, what does it mean about me. So we put all this meaning into events, where events are kind of neutral, and we see them as good or bad, and we have a story about what that meant for us. So we bring to everything we are up to right now has been kind of a story. We've been building a story all along. We have a story about how we grew up and what happened to us and the various adventures and our relationships, what they are and how they've been, how we relate to our relationships and what happened in those relationships. So we have kind of a story. And that story is fed by our belief system. And so we have kind of an idea about ourselves that we that we build over the years, and it becomes powerful, and that sometimes we're locked into that. And so we end up actually seeing the world in a certain way. And so from a psychological viewpoint, we would say that, you know, we bring our psychology into the way we see the world, and then we see it that way. From a deeper metaphysical point of view, if you read this quantum mechanics and all things like quantum physics and stuff like that, they're starting to talk about that it's not just that we impose our interpretation on the world, but it gets kind of interesting when it starts to say we actually, by looking at the world, we're actually physically changing it, that the world can't exist without the observer, and so that we're actually constructing the world through all. Now this is getting kind of, whether you believe this or not or all that, but there's all kinds of scientific data pointing to this idea that you know, we don't live in a solid world. We live in, actually, we can't even really find matter. At most it's something that comes in and out of existence and is mostly energy. Mostly what we have out there is empty space and energy. And that, you know, we can influence the fields of energy through our perceptions and all that. Now, maybe I'm going a little bit further than I need to in all this, but it's just interesting, you know, the relation between us, the perceiver, and the world that we perceive. But at minimum, we're going to say if there's the world out there, we at least impose meaning on it, and we build stories around our life and the world and how everything works. And sometimes we build stories about ourselves that are unhealthy, or that they're making us continue to repeat patterns, negative patterns. And one strategy for change is to actually consciously change your story. So reading a book where the idea was to, and I knew this before, this is what we call narrative therapy. This is narrative, meaning there's a narrative to our view of the world, and we need to understand what that narrative is, and part of the therapeutic process is changing the narrative. Sometimes it's seeing how you saw the past, the story that you have made, and then seeing if you can rewrite that story in a different way, so that, you know, rather than if you've seen yourself as being victimized and all these bad things that happen to you, to sort of say, what if you reinterpreted that and saw yourself as the hero, and seeing all your gifts of resilience and courage and all of these things that were brought into your story that you never sort of saw it that way. And that can be a powerful way of changing things. So one strategy is to actually write out your story, physically write it, you know, and write it in the third person, you know. Phil Naylor was born in such and such, and he grew up in these, and these things happened to him, and this is what he thought, and these are his beliefs, and this is what he cares for. So if you write out your story in terms of both events and also the internal perceptions and feelings that you bring to it, that gives you an understanding of how you've been thinking and how you see your life. And then the next strategy is to actually write a new story from here on in. You actually write it in the past or present tense. So you write the future as a new story about how you'd like to see that. And so you might take out some of those things, your old patterns and the way you perceive things. And that's where you could say that, you not only anticipate all these positive, actual events or possessions you might get, situations that you might have, but also the way that you will feel and experience and the values you bring into that and what's exciting. And so even though it feels like a complete fiction and that, well, I can't ever believe that, you kind of write what you would want. You just write what you want, your life, that it would look like, the kinds of things that would happen. You put all your kind of how you would like to vision the future, as well as how you would like to be in yourself in the future, the kind of person that you want to be and bring into the future. And you keep working at that story. And so you might want to work at for 30 days, keep working at the story, working at little aspects, the small things, working at how you're going to vision your day. And you start to kind of really start to live out and focus on a new story. And that can be very transformational when you start to see your old story the way it was, what you don't like about your old story, and then actually changing it into a new story, having a new narrative for how you're going to be. And so I would recommend trying this. If you are looking to make some significant changes in your life, try reflecting, write out your story, and then start to write a new story. And it doesn't matter if it's all fiction, like it's all fictional actually. Even our past is fictional because it's just, how we made it up. Somebody else could look at our life and see it in an entirely different way. And we may say, well, you didn't live it, yours is the fiction. But because we do and bring our own kind of mental baggage and everything and impose it on the past, that's a fiction. And so if you look at, I get to pick what fiction I live by, why not make a good fiction, right? Why not make a great story? And work on making it an interesting story, not just a factoid list of things, but write a story with kind of adventure and passion and all those sorts of things into it. And then again, that works with our unconscious mind. Our unconscious mind likes stories. And so you're also giving a message that, okay, that's an old story. We're going to kind of finish that story and we're going to start a new story. And our unconscious starts to kind of move towards that, just like I gave the analogy of the captain and crew of a cruise ship. So when if you don't want to keep going to the same destination, and if the captain just says, okay, just stop going to that destination, but doesn't give you a new destination, everybody's confused and doesn't know how to change. They don't know how to change unless you have a clear vision of the future. Or writing a story is another way of giving yourself a clear vision of the future. And you're telling your unconscious, hey, there's where we're going. Hey, this is interesting. Writing this compelling story of the future. And here's a new idea about how we might be. Here's a new idea about how we might feel. And so I encourage you to try that. I'm starting to work on it myself. So try that. Try writing the new narrative. The other important thing that I'm kind of remembering, I probably tell people this and then I forget myself, but is that, we want to start to de-link how we feel from the events that happen. That we tend to, go back to the external locus of control. When we have an external locus of control, we think that how we feel is caused by the things that happen out there. And so if good things happen, we'll feel good. If bad things happen, we'll feel bad. And how we feel internally is all to do with what happens out there. Whereas an internal locus of control would say, how I feel isn't dependent on what happens out there. I get to choose. I'm going to focus on how I want to feel and choose how I want to feel and reinterpret potentially bad events into something not so bad or has a silver lining or something, or that we just know that challenging stuff is going to happen, but I'm going to choose to remain happy and positive anyway. And so when we start to de-link our internal feelings from what happens out there, that we get to choose our feelings, choose to be happy. There's a saying, happiness is a choice. Choose to be happy. And this is a skill that we need to develop when we actually make choices about our thoughts and feelings. We actually can choose those things. So that's a kind of little tangential between what I was just talking about, but they are linked in the sense of when you write a story, you write into it how you choose to feel, how you choose to be, how you choose to experience the world. So I'm going to leave that with you. I'm going to encourage you to try that. Try writing out your own old story and then rewriting out the story from here. And write it as if the things that you expect, write as if there was a character and you're writing another chapter, and as if those things have already happened, of all the positive things, and you can describe how you feel and all those all of the aspects of the character, and try and be, creative about it and artistic about it and all of that, and get it inspiring. Write an inspiring story. Okay, so that's my advice for today. Go write yourself a good story for what happens from here, and make it a good one, and make sure that you're an interesting and vital character that acts and thinks and feels and behaves the way you choose to. Okay, so that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this thought, and I'll be back next week with Tea with a Therapist 18. This is 17, I believe. So anyway, please, if you like this stuff, make a comment, give me a thumbs up or thumbs down or whatever. Just tell a friend or something, okay? Give me some feedback. That's always helpful. Anyway, thank you, and I will see you next week. I'm Phil Naylor, and thanks for joining me.